Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks for taking the time to have a conversation.
Okay, no problem. What is this about? Ethan Klein? How boring.
Yeah, I know. Um, yeah, I mean, you and I have both been kind of focusing on him, and it is kind of getting to the point where it's been boring. But
The
I don't know.
problem is you can only focus on him so much because he's not like he's going to say anything new at this point. He's just going to run the hits over and over again. He's not exactly capable of like being dynamic. So it's
Right?
like you refute him on the same thing 1,000 times over. What more can you do?
No,
Just gets annoying after a point. I told
yeah,
Hassan to stop watching my videos because every time that happens, Ethan will post about me, and then I feel like I need to respond. So, yeah,
so you told Hassan to stop watching your videos?
I told someone who talks to Hassan to tell him to stop watching my videos. Or I didn't actually tell him.
I mean, the funny thing about that is like Ethan wasn't even in the videos of yours that Hassan was reacting to.
Oh yeah, it's like other video. He is just like I don't know. He's just literally thinks about Hassan 24/7. I don't know. It's some sex thing for sure. It's the only explanation that I have for it.
Yeah, that's funny to think
Like
about.
it's if every single person who he has targeted, it's been because Hassan talked about them or talked to them or said like even a line about them or something. It's all because of Hassan.
Well,
It's
even
nothing else, just
even with
Hassan.
LonerBox, like I feel like the reason Ethan interviewed LonerBox is because Hassan was reacting to LonerBox.
Because Hassan watched a video where that said bad things about LonerBox. Exactly, that's all. Before that, I doubt he even fucking had any idea who he was.
Yeah, yeah. Like, how did you come across Destiny and LonerBox? Because that's kind of some. I mean, obviously Destiny's he's pretty big, but
Well, Destiny's like a he's been like a debate stream idiot for like 10 years, so it's kind of impossible not to have come across him like
right.
years ago, like 5 years ago, I think, is when I first started like getting his shit shown to me on YouTube. And LonerBox was years ago, like a couple of years ago, he had like a thing on his stream where he had a moment where he said that Hassan should be banned because people in his chat like China too much.
Oh, okay, that's fun.
Um, and I responded to that. And like on my second channel, my shitty second channel, I didn't actually make a real video on it. Obviously, I would never do that. But then that's how I found out about him. And from the very beginning, it was obvious that he was just like, at least to me, everyone else got very angry at me for saying this at the time. But it was extremely obvious that he was just like a Western liberal who supports Western geopolitical like targets. Or sorry, supports Western geopolitical allies and opposes Western geopolitical targets. And just tries to come up with like vaguely leftist sounding grunts to justify that.
Yeah, like I haven't really gotten too much into his politics. I think I'm gonna start watching a little bit more of his videos, but just from the interview that he's had with Ethan, like it, and the clips that I've seen that you've shown, it does seem like he's pretty much kind of just
It's way
repeating Western
worse now than it
propaganda.
was before.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
it's way worse now than it was before. But it's just no, it's not worse. It's just more obvious. Like he's
Mm.
like the thing I had like a feud with him like 2 years ago because there was this Israeli VTuber like with an anime avatar
Oh, really?
who like was making videos whitewashing the Nakba and stuff like that and like talking about like just being like a generic Israeli liberal, the Israeli
Yeah.
liberal Zionist.
Hmm.
And he like defended her and said that she was an awesome voice for like the Palestinian cause and stuff. And to me, it was so fucking obvious. Like, it's the sort of thing that like the liberal Zionists talk about, where it's like, I support gay rights. All people are humans. Blah blah blah. But we have to maintain a Jewish ethnic majority here, and also
Yeah.
we can't give them anything back. It's you know she was basically saying that sort of thing, and I saw that, and it's like I recognized it immediately.
So
And
you
then
were making
LonerBox jumped to
videos.
her defense.
Oh, yeah. So you were like
Yeah, I
calling
made a
her
couple
out.
of videos on that. Yeah, I made a couple of videos on that because she was getting boosted by big creators as well, like Vaush and maybe Destiny as well. But Vaush had her on,
Oh yeah,
and
I was wondering what that video you shared with me was.
Vaush invited her onto his stream, and he suggested to her that she start calling me an anti-Semite. Um,
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to watch that video you shared with me because I'm super curious to like see that conversation that Vaush had with her.
that's a guy who said like a year before, like yeah, I don't know. I don't know how familiar you are with the sphere that you're inadvertently getting yourself involved in here, but
Yeah.
it's people who define themselves based on their opponents, more or less, more than anything else.
Mm.
So Vaush is someone who years before that said that Israel should be nuked, for example, but because he disliked me, he was happy to like invite like an out and out Zionist onto his stream and like help her to lick her wounds a little bit.
And
It's so
basically, he
weird.
just dislikes you because you've made a few videos about him in the past,
I
or
don't
like,
even
is there anything
remember.
more than that?
Vorsh's fans like just hate me, and Vorsh hates me as well. I don't even remember what it was. I think it was like literally like 4 years ago. Like he made a video like justifying voting for Joe Biden, quoting Lenin and stuff, and I made a response to that,
Mm.
and then escalated from there.
Yeah, I think I
But it's
saw
just
like
I
him
think he's
reacting to a debate you did or something on his YouTube channel.
it was probably the LonerBox debate because
Yeah, yeah, it
I
was.
was like an unperson for Vorsh. Like he does not mention me because if he does, that increases the risk that people seek out the videos that I've made about the stuff that he said.
So you've debated LonerBox before, like live and in person, not just video to
Yeah, like
video?
2 years. No, video, like stream debate, not in person.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
two
but
years
like
ago.
live at least.
Yeah, like he was like um defending liberal Zionism basically, and apparently until Israel started massacring tens of thousands of Palestinians or hundreds of thousands, whatever
Right.
estimate you want to go with, no one noticed that he was a liberal Zionist. And now lots of people who go back and watch that debate tell me that they see it in a completely different light now.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
like, it's like he had like tons of people on his side back then, just because they hated me, like Vorsh's community and stuff. So
Yeah, and it's like, oh well, he's just saying that 8 million Jews shouldn't leave Israel. That's all that he's saying. It's kind of
yeah, that's literally
the
all
vibe.
all that they're like. It's like they try to make everything about like, well, what about the poor oppressors, right? They try to make everything a question of, oh, say, okay, so you think Palestinians should be liberated? Does that mean you think that 8 million Jews should all die?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like
Exactly.
they just try to change the grounds of the discussion to what about the rights of the oppressors? And it's like, okay, these people cannot be liberated until you present us with like a 12-point plan for how you're going to ensure that the people they have oppressed for the last 100 years don't hate them.
Yeah, I went back and I watched Ethan's debate with Hassan, and it was that like leftovers episode that wasn't a leftovers where like they called in and Ethan had to take that crying break. And going back and re-listening to that is super telling because Ethan's entire position is if you stop oppressing Palestinians, that will make Israelis feel like they're in danger. And you
Yeah,
can't
it's a
have that.
Confederate slave owner argument.
Right. It's exactly that. And I made like I made a video that I posted today and I basically said the exact same thing. Like, are we going to ask the white people, the white slave owners, how they feel about liberating slaves? Is that
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, you've reacted
sorry.
to Ethan just as much as I have. Is that kind of the impression you get of his position?
No, it's not just his position. It's the generic sort of Israeli liberal position. They try to. It's just a complete reframing of the issue. It's a dishonest tactic, obviously. It's changing what you're talking about completely from we should liberate these people to, well, what about the people who they're going to be liberated from? What about them? And they try to change the grounds of what you're talking about from talking about Palestinians and the things that are done to them, how we can stop these things being done to them, how we can achieve justice for them, and into but what consequences will that have for the people who are doing that to them? Which
Right.
is a ludicrous thing to even be talking about, honestly.
Yeah, and Ethan tries to justify it by saying that it would be easier to uproot like the hundreds of thousands of settlers that are in the West Bank and bring them back to Israel and then have that like whole separate but equal idea than it would be to just stop oppressing Palestinian people. That's essentially
Yeah, and I mean,
what he
I'm
would
sure it would
say.
have been a lot easier to keep black people in the Bantustans as well and just have like a two-state solution,
Yeah.
in South Africa or whatever. But that's the thing. We don't want that. So the thing is, we force something on the Israelis that they don't want. If they don't like that, well, okay, just leave like a lot of the South Africans did. I don't
Yeah,
give a fuck, man.
and that was probably the grossest part of Ethan's conversation with LonerBox. When was that? Last Monday or this Monday? How
Mm.
they said that what's happening in Palestine and with Hamas is nothing like what happened in South Africa with the ANC, because the ANC, they were not violent terrorists. They only targeted infrastructure. But Nelson
Yeah,
Mandela
it's easy. It's
knew,
easy to do that when you're 90% of the population. It's so much easier to do
right?
to like avoid violence.
But the other thing was like LonerBox gave the number that only 71 people died in an 8-year period.
I'm
And
100% sure that's incorrect.
but even so, like I looked up the numbers, and in the 8-year period between 2015 and 2023, like about 150 Israelis died. So like the numbers are analogous to what was going on in apartheid South Africa, and they still want to kind
So it
of,
was only talking about one side. I thought that was like both.
maybe it was
Like it
both
wasn't even.
sides, but it's still pretty relevant if LonerBox is trying to make the argument that the ANC was not as violent as what Hamas is in Israel. You can still look at the numbers and be like, okay, well, Hamas only killed like 150 Israelis before October 7th over the course of 8 years, and you're trying to make the case that Hamas is so much more violent and bloodthirsty, and they're like a unique form of evil that Israel needs to oppress.
Yeah, but the thing is that they're also totally different situations. Like the population thing is a completely different dynamic.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
that's true too.
and the ANC, the armed wing of the ANC, I forget what it's called, Mkonto Sweezy or
It
something
was
like
like
that.
MK or
Like
something.
yeah, their full name's like it's something in Zulu, but they carried out like some of the most dangerous sabotage attacks in human history. They sabotage a nuclear power plant with bombs. Like,
Right. It's just
do
a
you think
different,
he would be? Do you?
like
Let's
it
ask
is
a hypothetical
terrorism.
question. Yeah, like, do you think LonerBox would support Hamas sabotaging an Israeli nuclear power plant? He would throw a fucking fit about that. He'd like talk about how Hamas risked the nuclear holocaust or some shit. Like, that's the thing that I think needs to be realized here is they're coming up with whatever shit comes to mind. It's not really because they just support Israel. It's just coming
Hmm.
up with whatever shit comes to mind
It
to support Israel. That's what it always is.
right, and like what Ethan said in that conversation with Lonerbox that also kind of blew my mind is that he said settlers would be valid military targets. So he would be fine with Hamas killing the settlers, even though the settlers would have kids
He
with
was not
them.
okay with that when he talked to me. I think like his argument changes depending on who he's talking to, the situation that he's in,
Right.
because he's backed into a corner right now. He's sort of trying to frame himself as more of a leftist than he really is. So it's convenient to him in this moment to be like, okay, they can kill the settlers. He does not believe that one bit, not even close. Come on.
Yeah.
Especially like the Gaza envelope settlers are, what difference is there to that, to the West Bank? It's both frontier colonialism. Like the Gaza envelope settlers are even worse because they're there because they want to be human shields.
Yeah.
Like that's what those settlements are for. The location of those settlements was chosen specifically by the IDF, specifically to be tailor built there so that they could have like a human presence on the Gaza border, to be like the first line of defense in the event of a breakout from Gaza, which is precisely the purpose that they served. On October 7th, a lot of the settlers in those settlements took up arms as well, because obviously most of them are military reservists in Israel, or military veterans in Israel. A lot of military veterans are allowed to keep their weapons post-service, and those settlements are full of them. So that's why they're there. A couple of them also have accompanying military bases, either within the grounds or like just outside. Like, what is the difference? What is the meaningful difference between saying, okay, it's okay if you kill West Bank settlers, which to be clear, I don't even think that's a normal thing to really do. Maybe the ones on the very front line, but beyond that,
Right,
there
and
has to be
not and
limits.
even then, not necessarily just kill them, but like you do need to meet
Yeah, I
violence
mean,
with
the point isn't to
violence.
kill them for the sake of them. The point is to get them out,
Right.
to make them leave, which is totally valid. I mean, that was the purpose of like, Indian raids, for example, in the 19th century US. They were raiding frontier settlements not because they wanted to just kill people there randomly, because they wanted them to fucking leave,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
was the way they had available to them to try and get that to happen.
So when you hear people talking about like, oh, Hamas is firing rockets into Israel, how does that help Hamas's cause? How did October 7th help Hamas's cause? These stupid oppressed people, they are making things harder for themselves by carrying out these violent actions, and they're not being the perfect victim. How would you respond to someone like LonerBox or Ethan Klein saying that?
Well, if you want Hamas to be able to make actual, like, for one, the option is either throw rockets or do nothing, is shoot rockets or do nothing. And between those two options, when you are constantly being bombarded, when you are stuck in a concentration camp, you have a foreign power that dictates what gets in, what gets in, what gets out, who gets in, who gets out. Like periodically, they just attack you and bomb you. It's like, what are you supposed to do? You are a guerrilla group with incredibly limited options available to you. And one of the options that you have is that you can fabricate these incredibly low tech rockets that you can just sort of dumbfire out of the prison that you're stuck into. I mean, do they have guided missiles? No. If you want to
Yeah.
give them guided missiles, I'm sure they'd like to use them to target military targets, but it's not really an option, is it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you think they like, if they had the option, they wouldn't rather shoot a bunch of missiles at like the Mossad headquarters or something? They don't have that option. And Norman Finkelstein talked about this once in one of his books. He brought up the concept in international law of belligerent reprisals, which is that you're allowed to violate international law in certain circumstances if you're retaliating like in kind in the way that you are being attacked. And given that Israel makes plenty of indiscriminate attacks against Gaza, why the fuck can Hamas not make indiscriminate attacks, technically indiscriminate attacks? I mean, it's not like it's intentional, right? It's like yeah, they're like sitting there like making like evil villain voices saying, okay, we need to fire these rockets that are dumb at them specifically because we want them to hit shit randomly. It's not
Right.
that. They're using them because it's all they have. And it's like either they do nothing or they at least do something in response. And doing something as a response is objectively better. So the thing is, LonerBox wants them to do nothing in response. Obviously, that's the whole point for him. It's his problem is not the targeting; it's that they're attacking back at all.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. I feel like at this point, like they've tried diplomacy, they've tried pushing for independence on the global political stage. They've tried peaceful protesting, and at this point, there is no option left for Palestinian people. It's either do nothing and get slowly ground out of existence, or have these sporadic bursts of violence to let Israel know that there is still a pressure being used to push back against their colonial expansion. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that October 7th as a military operation was a massive strategic failure, which I mean, it probably was given the Israeli response, but they didn't know that at the time, obviously. Um,
Yeah.
and if you look at the actual operation in terms of like, for example, the ratio of children killed, the ratio of confirmed armed personnel killed versus civilians killed, the ratio is significantly better than what Israel is doing to Gaza right now.
Yeah, what was
And
it
Israel
like?
has all of the precision weaponry and all of the intel in the world.
It was like what, 32% military targets killed on October 7th?
Yeah, and only 14 children out of what 1.1k total, I think it is now, something like that. And like, in Israel and Gaza has killed what, like 35% children, something like that. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I
even
think I
if
just
even if
saw a
we
stat
accept,
today where it's like 72% women and children in Israel that
yeah, so like
Israel's
even if
killed.
we accept the idea that October 7th involved lots of intentional killing of civilians, then what the fuck is happening in Gaza given the comparison between the ratios there? 14 total kids, I think it was. But let's just say, just to, I don't remember exactly the number, but let's say like let's increase that to like 50 just for the sake of argument. That's
Yeah.
still so like the ratio is just totally off. And that makes it clear that, for example, when the militants on October 7th found children, they intentionally avoided shooting them. And the ones who did die very likely died by accident. There's no other way to get that, to have that few child victims of October 7th. So clearly, if these people somehow rationalize October 7th as like the ultimate barbarity, and then they look at what's happening in Gaza, which is just clearly way, way, way worse and clearly way, way, way more indiscriminate. I mean, it's not even indiscriminate, it's intentional targeting of civilians, obviously. Then, I mean, they don't really have a leg to stand on there at all.
Yeah, but the people in Gaza or Israel is not classified as a terrorist organization, so you're supporting terrorism if you make that claim. If you make that comparison, you're supporting terrorists. You're a terrorist supporter.
I mean, that argument is just a basic, like, stupid appeal to legality.
Yeah. Also, if your name is Hassan, you can't make that argument because that's like an ethnic sounding name.
Yeah, you can't bring a 19-year-old Yemeni who, to be clear, he's not a Houthi. He never hijacked anything. That was made clear. The translation was bad in Hassan's interview with him. Like, apparently that is like terrible and unforgiving, but spending 2 days hanging out with the Israeli Goebbels, Eilon Levy, that's totally fine. It's not a big deal.
No, yeah, that was insane.
Yeah, and LonerBox is making the excuse now that he was just talking to him as like to interview him. It's like a journalistic thing, which is very funny because the video that I responded to regarding LonerBox's genocide denial, the first video was him reviewing a debate between Mehdi Hassan and Eilon Levy, and in that debate he almost exclusively responds to Mehdi Hassan, refutes everything that he says, and whenever Eilon Levy says something, he just keeps watching and waiting for what Mehdi says so that he can refute it. So it's not like he disagreed with him.
Yeah.
Like, they're one and the same.
Do you think that LonerBox is actually getting paid by Israel?
I think the trip was almost certainly
Well, the trip was probably
paid for by Israel.
Right, that was paid
something
for.
that hasn't. I was going to cover this on my stream tomorrow, but I'll give you the exclusive.
Right.
Destiny got in contact with Benjamin Netanyahu's cousin in March, which was before the trip, I believe. Destiny had Benjamin Netanyahu's cousin on his stream. They talked for like an hour.
His cousin? That's crazy.
And then magically, a few months later, he and LonerBox are in Israel, and they have access to all of these Israeli state propagandists. They have like free reign to go wherever they want in Israel. There's no scrutiny of them at all. Which, like, if I tried to enter Israel, like, I would be deported immediately. Like, anyone who's meaningfully anti-Israel cannot get into that country.
Right. I mean, or they'd let you in, and then you just want to leave, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's
they might
pretty like Israel does this all the
Hamas.
time. I don't know if you know this, but for example, I'll link you an article right now. Maybe you can
Okay.
forward to your fans or whatever. But there was a scandal. Well, not really a scandal. It was a social media thing. The actual news outlets just ignored it in Australia of journalists from Australia who get invited to Israel for like all expenses paid tours and stuff. And it is absolutely like Israel does this all the time with journalists. Like, they invited Ollie London, for example. That's a funny one. Ollie London, the guy, the trans-Korean guy.
Yeah.
And they gave him a nice press vest and took pictures of him so that he could feel like he's a real journalist. They do this all the time with everyone. There's no reason for us to suspect that they would not see the direction of these people's content and then be like, okay, guys, come here. We'll help you out. We'll at least help you. We'll fix this stuff for you. And, when the Israeli state is working on your behalf, when it doesn't even have to be the Israeli state. Like Birthright, for example, just to throw out an example here, Birthright is a private organization. It's not actually the Israeli state. Like, Israel has a ton of like parastatal organizations that work on behalf of the state as well. It doesn't have to literally be the Israeli government, but they undoubtedly got help from one of those organizations or from the state itself. There's no other way they could have gotten in contact with literally dozens of different Israeli propagandists like that and been given free reign to go wherever the hell they wanted, including the West Bank.
Right, because it wasn't Eilon Levy like the official spokesperson for the Israeli government
at the time.
He
had been fired, but he still obviously has his contacts and stuff. He's just not working in an official capacity anymore. He was fired because he kept responding to David Cameron on Twitter, and the UK government asked Israel if his statements are official Israeli statements, and then he got fired for it.
Oh, okay. So he was just almost horny posting on Maine, but with horny
Yeah,
for genocide.
like he's a spokesman, and he was acting like he was like a vigilante or something for Israel. He went a bit too far for them.
Wow, going too far for Israel. That is an impressive dedication to the cause of wiping out the Palestinian people.
I was gonna link you an article, but I haven't been able to find it. But I mean, it's really easy to find.
I mean, we see
Oh no,
that
here's
all the
one.
time too, with like John Fetterman going to Israel, Elon Musk going to Israel, and it's like he goes there, and it's almost like a confession for crimes against Jewish people. Your crimes will all be all your crimes against Jewish people will all be forgiven if you come to Israel, and then you start towing the Israeli propaganda line.
Yeah, I just linked you an article. I don't know if you can bring it up, but you
Oh
literally
yeah, I'll
go to
check it
this.
out.
This is a list of journalists in Australia who have been given like state-funded tours of Israel. Not just people who have gone there to do coverage, state-funded tours. It is literally like 10 pages long.
Pro-Israel, so they're sponsored by pro-Israel lobby groups and interest organizations.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
that's how they like technically say, okay, it's not the state, so it's okay. But I mean, when you look at the Israeli, like the Israeli state was founded like a a British style colonial enterprise. It was founded by a bunch of joint stock companies. Those joint stock companies still exist. They still have under their umbrella a ton of different organizations, like the Jewish National Fund, for example, stuff like that. So Israel has like a bunch of corporations tied to it that are basically part of the Israeli state, even though officially they aren't.
Mm.
And that's how they get around like foreign influence laws. It's like, oh, I wasn't invited by the Israeli state. I was invited by the Jewish National Fund or something like that.
Yeah, that is gross. So why? I mean, other than the obvious, they're just trying to get more propaganda to say pro-Israeli talking points. Is there any more like deeper reason Israel's doing this? And I guess I'm kind of getting at like, why is the rest of the world so hesitant to kind of give Palestinians any kind of sovereignty in the face of Israeli aggression, in your opinion?
Well, I think like the official stance has been a two-state solution of like all of the Israeli ally countries, though. I don't know if you ever looked at the actual deals they've offered. They offer like basically like the present situation with Israeli settlements normalized, and then like Palestine is not allowed to have a military, and Israel is allowed to like send troops there whenever they want. It's basically they just want to formalize the current situation.
Yeah, that
But
makes sense.
I think in general, like Israel is sort of like it's a self-replenishing military in the Middle East that independently pursues the interests of the Western countries very well, aside from when it makes them look bad by going a bit too far. Like if you think of like what Israel does to its neighbors, is like Israel's attacks on Iran, for example, things they don't really want to get their hands dirty with anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's exemplary, and it also gives them uh, a place to like a sort of a dumping ground for a historically undesirable minority who are very often enticed to go and live there. And then they go and live there and they potentially join the military, or they have kids who then join the military there. And then, those people get conscripted into the military and they fight what are basically um, the sort of wars that the West would like to fight, but that does not want to do so directly. And overall, it's like it keeps everything in line, and they've done a brilliant job of it. Like if you look at the state of the Middle East today, the only real power there that is not in the pocket of the US is Iran, and a huge reason why they are so successful in the Middle East. I guess there's Syria too, but I mean that's not going to last very long given what's
Mm,
happening in the last
yeah.
couple of days. But the and that's also the only reason why Syria has survived against I'm not saying survive rather. The only reason why there's still a government in Syria that is against the US is because of Iran.
Right,
So
right. So
If you look at like Egypt, for example, Egypt has a government that is just a complete lapdog of Israel and the US, and a huge part of that is because Israel, with US support, is able to keep Egypt in line for the US, and that's huge for the US.
yeah, so is it just not really any more complicated than essentially a fancy military base for the United States? And then that's something we
In
see
many ways,
all
it
over the
is.
world.
It's there's also the fact that Israel produces tons of weapons. Israel is also a testing ground for tons of weapons.
Mm,
It
mm,
buys tons of weapons that subsidize weapons. It's the big part of neoliberalism. The shift to neoliberalism is governments basically creating demand themselves for private companies to then compete for. And U.S. government contracts to Israel are based around the government doesn't just give Israel the money, like the U.S. government forces Israel to use that money on American military companies, that their products. So it's like precisely what they want. Um, and there's also what was I going to say? I forgot. That was too long. But Israel, like, it is mostly military. Yeah, it is mostly military. But there is also the element of Israel being allowed to make clear, like people say that like the Jewish or the Israeli lobby in Western countries is why Israel is allowed to do what it's allowed to do, and it's part of it. But also that lobby is allowed to exist by those Western countries. You
right.
know, they let it exist. They don't do anything against it. They don't do anything to stop it when they easily could have if they wanted to. And the whole reason for that is because they perceive what Israel does as being in their interests. And really, like, those organizations are not only useful to be pro Israel, they also help in many other respects. They support American foreign policy in general. They are very, very right now. There's the whole anti-Muslim fervor in Western countries against immigrants and stuff like that.
Hmm.
They are very much helpful with that.
Yeah.
So overall, it's like a very mutually beneficial relationship, and there's many aspects to it in which it is mutually beneficial.
Right. It's
And it's just
beneficial
like,
for like the people in power.
yeah, but it's like to to the US, to the West, to its geopolitical interests, the Palestinians offer them nothing. The Israelis give them a ton of utility, and the people who support the Israelis as well give them a ton of utility. So they don't lose anything. They don't give a shit. The thing that they lose is like street cred with the public, who clearly at this point have no power to stop them. So why do they care?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And like while you're talking about how much of a military interest Israel is for the United States, it's kind of gotten me like just listening to you now. I'm like, goddamn, there's no reason for the United States to ever pressure Israel to do like a one-state solution because honestly, I feel like that the ethno-state status of Israel really kind of like lubricates the wheels of war. Like it makes it easier for Israel to get into conflicts with its neighbors. And
Yeah,
then,
it gives them a reason to hate it, obviously,
yeah, it gives them a
as well.
reason to hate and a reason to be hated. And then also like the the whole Zionism ideology is kind of like it's self-perpetuating because when you send Jewish people there, like Israel's kind of born out of anti-Semitism and it creates anti-Semitism, but it's also sustained by anti-Semitism because when like Israel does horrible, atrocious things in the name of Jewish people and like Jewish peace, that will create anti-Semitism for people not living in Israel, and then those people are going to want to go to Israel because Israel's saying, look at all of this anti-Semitism you're experiencing. You should come here where you're going to be safe.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, it's self-perpetuating in every respect. Not just like there's that, and then there's the way that Israel just like Israeli troops basically do in the Middle East what the U.S. troops after, especially after Iraq, can't do anymore because
Mm-hmm.
the public wouldn't be up for it anymore. So it's very beneficial for them in the twisted logic that they have. of what's beneficial for them. And yeah, I mean, I don't really think there's that much more to it. A lot of people like to say that it's like, sort of the tail wagging the dog sort of thing, where the pro-Israeli lobby in the US and the rest of the West makes them support Israel. But no, I mean, it's a cold calculation. Is the Israelis do stuff for them? What do the Palestinians do for them? Nothing. Why would they possibly care about Palestinians?
Right. Yeah. I mean, when we look at examples of like resistance groups throughout the world, um, like the IRA in Ireland and the ANC in apartheid South Africa, a lot of the times it does require like international pressure to support those resistance groups so that they do end up getting sovereignty and are able to represent themselves. I mean, do you see a scenario where Palestine gets any sort of sovereignty?
The current situation with Trump is it seems like the Israeli right will like push for annexation. And honestly, if that happens, it's better because this creates a massive demographic problem for Israel that they have been putting off, where they want to annex the West Bank, but they don't do it officially because then you have all of these people in your country who now technically will be almost outnumbering you in terms. And then what does that mean for the so-called Jewish state? What does that mean for that?
Right,
And then
before
that creates a
October
crisis
7th,
where they need to.
before October 7th, if
So
I was just going to say, like, in terms of demographics, if they did annex Gaza and West Bank before October 7th, I think it would be like pretty evenly split between Jewish people in Israel and like Palestinians or non Jewish people in Israel. So it'd be like pretty
yeah,
50
and they don't
50.
want that because like the talking point of the right wing is let's annex blah blah blah, and then the talking points of the like liberal Zionists, who are right wing as well, obviously, but within Israel they consider themselves not to be, is no, we can't do that because there'll be too many Palestinians, and then we'll have to either kill them, we'll have to do apartheid where they're not citizens, or we'll have to let them vote, which will then ruin everything about our country because they will vote for themselves, and then we won't have a Jewish state anymore.
Yeah.
So getting that contradiction in the field of play, given that the West Bank is already annexed already in every single practical measure except like officially, like making it official would cause that sort of demographic crisis in Israel, like the fear of the demographic crisis in Israeli society, which would, obviously they're not going to give them citizenship. What they're going to do is make the apartheid way more undeniable than it ever has been before, given that they would be literally living in Israeli territory at that point
Yeah.
officially.
There would be no
There's
more
no more,
excuse
oh,
of
but in the West
Hamas.
Bank they do apartheid. And that would probably make it untenable for at least some of Israel's allies to keep supporting it, like the ones that uh, at least have some like like if you look at like France, for example, it's a very weird France. Like Macron at numerous points has been like, you can't just keep killing kids. What the fuck are you doing? And the next day you get like a completely contradictory statement out of someone else in his government or something. Like, France recently said they don't want to enforce the ICC warrant. It's like, but like one of those countries like France maybe, or some other country that is like a supportive of Israel, but not like on the level of the US or the UK,
Hmm.
might be like sort of forced into finally sort of decoupling from Israel if something like that was to happen.
Yeah, and that's kind of a dark thought to have. It's almost like
Honestly,
a
it would not change the situation on the ground at all. It would not make
right.
things worse at all.
That's true. Um, and you're right. They're already basically like settling the West Bank, and it seems like they're starting to settle Gaza as well. So it would just
I mean,
make it a little bit more official.
the PLO is just a police force for Israel. It's like an outsourced police force for them. It's not
Yeah,
like
that's a good
you
point.
get rid of the PLO, you bring in the military. What's the difference? Honestly, all the PLO does is arrest Palestinians and hand them over to the fucking Israelis. Who
But
cares?
I mean, my fear is that they're going to annex the West Bank, they're going to annex Gaza, and they're just going to do an ethnic cleansing anyway. Like,
They don't
as
have
you
any way to
said,
ethnic cleanse them too.
They have not.
in
Wait,
both cases. That's the thing.
can you
They don't
repeat?
have any way to ethnically cleanse them too. None of the
No,
neighboring countries will let them do it. So it's going to force a demographic crisis on them.
that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. And we'll see. I mean, we're kind of seeing that play out in the United States with the whole Trump wanting to deport all of the illegal immigrants. And
Man,
it's kind of the same thing. Like,
he
there's a
doesn't.
demographic issue. What are we going to do with it? I don't think Mexico is going to play ball and just let Donald Trump dump everyone into
When
Mexico.
I say demographic issue, I'm referring more to like the um,
Right.
Jewish majority in Israel. They don't want
Right.
anything that threatens that.
Their perception of an issue. Like, obviously, if you have 50-50 Muslims versus Jewish people, that's not a real issue in any sense of the word. But if
For
you
them,
are
it
a
is,
Jewish
because they
supremacist,
specifically want. Yeah, I mean that's the whole problem with Israel. If a bunch of people migrated to Palestine, and then they declared independence with the people who already live there, and they just made one state, we wouldn't have this problem right now. The problem is they always wanted to make their own state just for them, and that's the root of everything. And now, they like to say, "Oh, Palestinians hate us. How could we possibly have one state with them?" Well, yeah, now they hate you. You'd hate them too. I mean, you'd hate yourselves too. And if you were in that position, like, what the fuck are you talking about?
no, that's the thing. Like, Ethan Klein had this whole thing where Hassan played that Houthi music video, and in one frame of the music video, in the background footage, there was like a crowd, and in the crowd there was the flag of the Houthis, where one of the lines on the
Mhm.
flag is like "Death to Jews." And the way I look at it, it's like, if you are living in an area where there's like this imperialist expansionist country and they define themselves as being Jewish, and like it's in their constitution that Jewish people have the right to self-determination and non-Jewish people don't have that right, what do you expect the neighboring countries to react to? Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's a hilarious talking point. Like, you, everyone has seen movies with like American soldiers fighting Nazis and calling them Germans and not being precise with their language. It's the same thing. Like,
right.
give us a fucking break.
Or, I mean, talk
It's not
about,
like, oh, sorry, I'm talking about Nazis, not Germans. No,
yeah,
no one did that.
and like talk about the last 2 decades of American media where it's been, we're going to kill the guys in one of those sand countries in the Middle East. And
Yeah, it's like, give me a fucking break. Like, the anti-Semitism thing is bullshit, especially from Ethan fucking Klein. Ethan Klein didn't even give a shit about being Jewish until like a year ago. Now it's magically like a huge part of his identity. Give us a fucking break, man. When it
man,
comes time to like, when you need something to fall back on, then it becomes a part of his identity. That's the only time.
yeah, and it really does just seem like he's, again, as you said, obsessed with Hassan, and he's kind of using this as a vector to attack Hassan. One of my favorite, I don't know if you saw this clip of Ethan Klein, but he was talking about, it was in one of the episodes like a few weeks ago, and he's like talking about communism, and he's like, well, Karl Marx, he's a communist, he's not a Jew. It's like, okay, so
Did he say no?
yeah, he literally said that. He's like, Karl Marx is more of a
Okay.
communist than a Jew, so he doesn't count. I'm like, what the fuck? You're literally like stripping the Jewishness off of people that you
Um,
don't like.
I mean, there was uh, like a 10-year period before this where the only time that Ethan ever mentioned Jews was to like say really vile things about Hasidic Jews.
Right, like
And
he was
now
Jewish
he's
for the
he's
jokes, right?
he's born again. Like, Jesus fuck, man, come on.
There's anti-Semitism behind every corner. Yeah, but I mean,
And like,
I was just gonna say, like, making
sorry,
fun
go
of
on.
Ethan it's fun and it's easy, and I also do think it's educational, because he does represent a pretty large demographic of like liberal Jews who they're fine with the apartheid state that Israel is. But what they're not fine with is Netanyahu doing a genocide. They're not fine with settlers, but they're like, those guys make Israel look bad. I want Israel to go back to the way it was, where we can have parties, we can like play music, people can go there and see how cool it is. Um, so like I think it's fine to address Ethan, and then you can also talk about how that whole ideology of like, let's not expand, let's not act on the premise that this ethno state sets up, but the ethno state itself is fine. But like, I don't think addressing those points is going to bring about direct change and give directly help with Palestinians. So, like, do you have any ideas on how to best end? I mean, obviously, end the genocide and then down the line end apartheid. Like, what are your thoughts on that, other than just harassing politicians and making their lives a living hell?
Well, the number one way to fight that right now is to stop giving order to stop being scared, basically, to stop, because in the Western countries that primarily back Israel have like the pro-Israel line enforced by what a like a bunch of NGOs, charities, etc. That basically, harassment groups is what they really are. They
Right.
basically exist to just scream anti-Semitism and ruin your life if you speak out too much. But the thing is, they can't do that to everyone. It's like if only one person speaks out, they can harass you, but they can't do it to absolutely everyone. And if everyone just treats them like the joke that they are, everyone stops being scared, then what's going to happen is, they lose control. It's like sort of like the thing I've heard people say before, where there's only so many cops.
Yeah.
When you get enough people in the streets, the cops can't do anything. Once you get enough people who aren't fucking afraid of being fired, or who are afraid of being fired but who speak out anyway, or who do something, then they can't go after you anymore. And once you pass that that barrier, then suddenly we can actually speak openly about this, and no one is afraid anymore. People who might be sympathetic to Palestine would be speaking out more about it, and that's really the primary barrier to what is happening in to getting something done here in the West. Is that it's like this entire apparatus of that is basically set up to ruin your life if you speak out against Israel by accusing you of anti-Semitism. Essentially, doesn't matter how big or small you are, they will try their best. And South Africa, the worst part about South Africa, the thing that made South Africa lose out, the thing that made Western countries begrudgingly sanction them in the end, is that they didn't have that sort of thing to fall back on. They didn't have this sort of massive, anti-Boerism harassment apparatus set up all over the West to make speaking about them as they were impermissible. But Israel does, and it's facilitated by the Western countries who know precisely how good it is for protecting the interests of their little military outposts in the Middle East. Um, and things are changing now already. I can see things are changing. People are saying things that they weren't saying before. But
Well,
in terms of like the more immediate thing where there's a genocide going on right now, I mean, um, what is the option? The option is military. The option is Egypt doing something. The option is Iran doing something meaningful. Iran doesn't want to do something meaningful. Egypt is controlled by an American puppet. So it's bleak. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
yeah, it's bleak. But in terms of like public opinion changing and people getting less afraid of being labeled an anti-Semite for criticizing Israel, yeah, I agree. I've definitely have seen a shift in online public sentiment, and I think like last week the ICC arrest warrants, that was a huge tipping point where
Yeah,
Israel's calling that
40.
anti-Semitic, and people are just laughing in their face at this point. They're like, oh, "What? Like, you literally can't anymore. You can't get any more blatant than that. Of an arrest warrant sent down to simultaneously to the leaders of Israel and the leaders of Hamas, and Israel's calling it anti-Semitic." And the United States is saying, well, they really rushed that arrest warrant. I think they should have played it slower because that's a
It's
little
great because
anti-Semitic.
it took four or five times longer than the arrest warrant for Putin did.
Right, exactly.
And they weren't really light on it as well. Like the prosecutor only submitted two specific attacks as examples of war crimes, which made the judges unable to make a ruling on extermination. So it's like it's the shittiest. It was the shittiest filing ever, and they still managed to get like 10 war crimes charges in there. That's how bad it is.
Yeah.
And then now like five European countries have come out and said basically they're not going to enforce it. It's just this is
Right.
the world. This is the world. Like, if you, what can you do about it? Things that you're not allowed to say on YouTube. That's what you can do about it.
Yeah, and man, even then, like even if we're going to, I don't know, it's extremely difficult to imagine anything really affecting, because at this point you're right, it's just an extension of the military industrial complex for the West, and that kind of exists at the core of all politics. Like it has insulated itself so well against anyone who would have any real power to affect any actual kind of meaningful change to it, that it's just hard to imagine. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
in terms of the ICC arrest warrants, like the most egregious thing Ethan Klein has said has been like defending Yoav Gallant as a moderating force on Netanyahu's cabinet. Have you made a video covering that?
yeah, at least one or two. It was very funny.
It blew my
Like,
mind that
I don't
like
know. Even talked about that guy. Like, he thought he was just a guy who had like a bad, like, N word coming out moment or something. Like, he said a bad
right,
phrase
just an
once.
edgy
Didn't
tweet.
see, he legitimately did not seem to be cognitive of the fact that that guy was like the architect. He was the guy who planned everything and told people what to do. Everything in Gaza has his fingerprint on it. He legitimately did not seem to conceive of that fact. He just thought he was like a guy who said a bad thing once. It's absurd.
Well, what blew my mind is like he doubled down on defending him in the video he made the next day. And I'm
Yeah, he's
like,
like, compared to Netanyahu, he's a moderate. Okay, I mean, compared to fucking Hitler, like Goebbels was a moderate, man. Like, I don't
yeah,
care.
I know it's insane. Also, like he literally wanted to expand the draft so that he could have more soldiers to fight against Lebanon. How is that a moderating? How is that an anti-war moderating force? Uh, anyway,
It's like his whole idea was like, okay, we're done. We've killed enough in Gaza. We've ethnically cleansed enough people. It's time to put them into like concentration camps and stop, trying to kill Hamas. That's what he wanted
right?
to do.
Yeah, yeah. Um, has Ethan sued you yet?
I mean, what would he sue me for? How would he
I don't
sue
know,
me?
harassment.
He doesn't even know where I am. He has no way of finding out where I am.
That's true. I feel like if he did, though, a lawsuit would not be far off.
It would be very like, okay, I have no assets in uh any like Western country, so I guess good luck with that.
Yeah, that was
But I
pretty.
mean, he could try to fix. Okay, I'd love it if even Clyde could find out where I live. Try to sue me where I live. He'd probably very quickly figure out that, like, I don't know, like, what would he sue me for? But let's say he sues me for defamation, and I let him win. I'd get fined like $30, so that's fine. I don't mind.
Yeah. What was the first thing that he saw of yours that was like, oh my god, this guy is unhinged, and I'm going to make videos saying that he
Oh,
wants
it
to
was
like
just it
eat
was
ladies?
Hassan reacting
That
to
was the first thing. But I feel like he had to
yeah.
know you before, because unless he just got a
Oh, he
bunch of
definitely
clips
knew
from
me
Destiny.
before because I made videos of him. But yeah, I'm sure you know that Ethan specifically attempts to avoid um, dealing with the facts, right? So he would never respond to me.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
the
that's
thing that
true.
finally made him acknowledge me was not like the 5 videos that I made refuting his points. It was Hassan reacting to a video that wasn't even about him, that he's not mentioned at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was weird. And then so like are you even on Twitter right now? Cuz the one thing that he had on you is that he
No,
showed
I'm
a
on Blue
real
Sky.
tweet. Oh, you're on Blue Sky? Okay. Cuz I looked you up on Twitter just now.
Yeah, see, the problem with him showing that tweet is that I gained so much from it that there's no possible way that I could prove damages. So there's no more defamation case. He made me blow up. Thanks, Ethan.
Well, it was so funny. Like he's like, "This is a real tweet, and it's a fake tweet," and he literally says, "This is a real
That is
tweet."
very. I mean, this he made himself into a meme. Like, he's holding. If you're ever holding up a screenshot of a tweet on your phone up to a webcam, just fucking log off, man. Just go to bed. Go spend some time with your kids. What is going on there?
Oh yeah, and then I looked you up on Twitter, and there's like 3 hate accounts of you, and then also there's this one's.
Yeah, there's there's people pretending to be me. Um, I don't know. Like my actual Twitter account got banned because like I got mass reported by Argentine fascists like 6 months ago, and
Jesus.
that was that. But I don't really care. I mean, Twitter is fucking awful. Jesus, it's bad.
Yeah. Honestly, I got on Blue Sky too to like DM someone, made
Blue
an
Sky is
account there.
insufferable. Like my
It
feed
has
on Blue Sky is like a Democratic Party Facebook page,
no, yeah, same.
but
Like
I mean,
I
it's still
log
not as bad as
on
Twitter.
and I see Kamala Harris making Thanksgiving dinner. I'm like, why am I seeing this right now? How does this help anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's bad, but at least it's like a way to have an off-platform method to like communicate with people who follow me, I guess.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, the
true.
YouTube community page, I use that already, but you can't go wrong having another option, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, I feel like we've been talking for almost an hour. Do you want to log off or
I mean, if you don't have anything else to say
um
to me, but something that I was going to say
oh yeah,
that
go ahead.
we went on a bit of a tangent there was so I think a big part of the problem is that people in the West in the last 30 or 40 years or so have been given a lot to lose and they don't want to lose it. And a big part of what's needed for Palestine is they need to take risks with what they have for people in in a faraway land.
Mhm.
And I don't think that most people want to do that. Even like think about like the U.S. civil rights movement. Why were people willing to put stuff at risk for that? Well, because they were black. It affected them. It made their lives worse. You
Yeah,
know,
that's true.
um, they achieved the civil rights. Good, great. But now it's like materially, can we rely on people to just be selfless and take the necessary action in their own countries for people who whose suffering they don't perceive a negative effect on them from? Probably not. And there's lots of people who are still taking action regardless of that, which is great, but it would be so much more. It could easily be so much more, but it's too easy to ignore. The economic system has in the West has successfully given uh, that's why, like, if you look at like Europe, for example, most of the people who are protesting for Palestine are recent immigrants who don't really have much to lose yet.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, that makes
like
sense.
first generation immigrants and stuff like that. So it's it's a very difficult question to solve. Like, how do you get people to put the necessary pressure on their governments more than they are doing already to force them to take action? In this
Right.
case, I don't think it's particularly a problem with that. I think it's in any other case, those governments would have already changed their stance. It's just because it's Israel that they haven't, specifically because it's Israel.
Yeah.
Israel's like the holy cow for them. It's too important for them to just give it up.
Yeah, you're right. And you're right about like it's too easy to ignore. Um, just kind of this last
That's
election
not to.
cycle. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to like denigrate the people who have done stuff for Palestine. Like people are turning out in huge numbers and stuff, but it's still not enough. Um, like when you look at the protests against the Iraq War, those were significantly bigger than anything that we've seen for Palestine so far.
Right.
And
And
I
that
think part of that is because there was the perception of this would hurt us. We would go there and our soldiers would fight them. It would cost us money, stuff like that. In Palestine, people know that the US and the West pays Israel and stuff, but it's really a tiny amount compared to what they paid for Iraq, for example. So,
yeah.
they don't really lose enough from this, and they don't really perceive any way in which it meaningfully hurts them. So most people, sadly, are not going to, you know, put um, their lives and reputation at risk for people who are being massacred in a faraway land,
Right. And
especially
that's
with Israel, because the whole apparatus that I spoke about earlier that will, dox you if you show your face at a pro-Palestine protest.
I mean, this kind of relates to it, but it's also something I wanted to talk about. Do you think that's why um, Israel was so quick to come up with a ceasefire with Lebanon? because their soldiers were actually getting killed by Hezbollah that was in southern Lebanon fighting against them. So like it was
I think
actually material
performed.
caused.
I think Hezbollah performed a lot worse than anyone would have expected. Really, I think Israel was in a very advantageous position. Um, I just think Lebanon is not important enough for them to really push further. So when they,
Yeah.
because with Lebanon, I think they are actually getting meaningfully pressured by the Western countries, at least in private, to stop, because it was never really on the menu for them. Lebanon is a pathetic country. Like, its military is technically not allowed to intervene when Israel invades it, which is a fucking absurd situation. Um, so it's like, you know, I just think there was a bit more pressure behind the scenes. Israel decided that they don't really have that much to gain there. I think they already have enough of a, like, they want to create like a demilitarized zone in Lebanese territory. They can do that already if they want. So, it's just a matter of massacring people. Um, and I guess maybe they want to do that, but I think for them, the calculation is that it's just not worth it with how much it's pissing off their allies and potentially like pissing off Iran as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Lebanon, it's actually a real country, unlike Palestine, like unlike
It didn't
Gaza and the West
really,
Bank.
honestly, it didn't really have much of an effect. Like, Lebanon has needed to have its own military to deter Israel for, it's needed to build up that capacity for like almost 20 years now. But the terms of the like agreements and the international pressure on Israel, or the international pressure on Lebanon rather, turned into like a super fucking weird country where it has like a military that doesn't fight Israel and then a paramilitary that does fight Israel, and Lebanon's being invaded and its military does not fight Israel. It's an absurd situation that Lebanon has been basically been forced into,
Yeah.
just by having the misfortune of being Israel's neighbor.
Yeah, it is pretty fucked there. Goddamn. Okay, well, let's end this on a bit of a more positive note. So, we've been talking a lot about people that have been defending Israel. Are there any content creators that you look towards that are doing a good job of criticizing Israel and being a voice for like Palestinians and like taking
Um,
shots at the idea of like the liberal Zionist? Like who have you
Not,
experienced?
I don't really watch much YouTube. Um, I mean, if I do watch YouTube, it's not like political stuff.
Oh, okay.
So that's why like most of the content that I make, if I respond to someone, it's negative because like I see it as an opportunity to talk about something. It's like an
Right.
excuse to like a framing device. Um,
Because I
in
would
terms
say
of
like
like,
a lot of the leftist YouTubers that I watch are really good at calling out Israel's war crimes and their general bullshit. Um, but then there's also guys like David Pakman who, whenever they talk about Israel, they're usually defending it. Or even Brian Tyler
yeah,
Cohen, who's like pretty much a Democratic shill, but I still think he's pretty effective as at what he does. And he doesn't talk about Israel at all. So like that's been disappointing to see, but those are more of like the mainstream liberal progressive voices than the hardcore leftists that will criticize the Democrats every now and then.
yeah, there are, I don't know, there are people who are, you know, criticizing the shit out of Israel as needs to be done, but most of the people who are not anywhere near the mainstream
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. You can't really get near the mainstream unless you fall in line. Hassan is like an exception to that. He just got so big, and so he got so big before
So
like
muscular.
the Israel thing, not literally, but he became like big as a streamer, and like got into like you know mainstream circles before this whole thing started. And that sort of puts him into a unique position where people from CNN actually want to talk to him, for example, whereas they will never acknowledge your existence.
Yeah,
And
what
outside of like a circumstance like that where you basically get lucky.
yeah, and like even though he's getting interviewed by guys like the CNN and he's at the DNC, he still has no effect at affecting
Yeah, I
any kind of
mean,
change in democratic policies.
it's totally ignorable. It's easily like
It's too easy to ignore.
the
You're
the,
right.
the the Democrats the Democrats ran on like a platform where we're not going to say that we're gonna do anything good or bad while they're doing nothing but bad things. And then you had like they trotted out like the strategic AOC to tell you that look, yeah, genocide is happening and it's bad, but you should vote for Kamala anyway. And like the uncommitted movement, which is basically like just a protest movement within the Democratic Party, still like pushing people towards working within the Democratic Party, for example. It's like
Yeah, I interviewed an
you're not going to
uncommitted
solve
guy.
you're not going to look, you're not going to solve an ongoing genocide by working within the party of the guys who are doing it. Like, come on, it's not. I don't even know why we're having this discussion. The fact that Americans have not even tried to build an alternative to the Democratic Party in the last like decade upon decade upon decade
I
is just
mean,
pathetic.
Jill Stein's party, the Green Party, they're like, we have 150 elected officials throughout the United States. It's like, okay, 10 years ago, you had the exact same amount of people, and yet you want people
I
to
don't
vote
even.
for you every election.
I mean, the Green Party is not what I mean. Like,
Well, they're just
it's too late now.
all I'm saying is that's our alternative, and it's literally a scam party. Like,
Yeah, the problem is like there's obviously it's. I mean, I don't have dispositive evidence of this, but I think it's fairly obvious that the strategy of the Democratic Party, the strategy of like U.S. federal government agencies, if they're still running these sorts of influence operations, I don't even know if they need to anymore, to be honest, is to sort of try to funnel potential revolutionary energy into the Democratic Party. They like it when there's organizations like DSA who work within the Democratic Party, for example, instead of making their own shit. Because you're never going to challenge the two-party system if that's what you do. And at this point, it's too late to challenge the two-party system anyway. Like the time to do that was the last couple of decades, and no one's doing that. So, it takes time. You have to
yeah.
build up from the ground up, gradually work your way up to the federal level,
Well,
and
our system is
by the time that could
designed.
possibly happen,
Our system is designed to maintain a two-party system. Like it's almost impossible to have a third party the way that it's set up, where it's
well,
like,
basically every system is set up in that way. But the idea isn't that it's not so much that you um, dismantle the two-party system; it's that you get in there and make yourself a part of it. What happened, for example, like Uruguay is a good example of this. In Uruguay, um, there was like a dictatorship there, a US-backed dictatorship. There were guerrillas who fought against it. After the dictatorship fell, the guerrillas formed a political party. They recruited a bunch of like other anti-dictatorship parties. They made their own party. They built this party up from the ground up over the course of like 20, 30 years, winning local elections, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually they won the actual presidential election 30 years later. And the two-party system was broken. No, it wasn't actually broken. What happened is the previous two parties joined together. They formed an
mm,
alliance against them, and now they're basically one party.
that makes sense.
So
Yeah, and that's what I was.
that's the sort of thing that I think of when I mean like that's what I think Americans should do is something like that. When I think they should challenge the two-party system is like build something from the ground up. Don't just vote for Jill Stein.
Yeah, no, I
Don't
totally
just run into
agree.
presidential elections. You have to do
Um,
more than that.
like I do think that there is an appetite for a party that is not the Democrats. I'll just say that. Um, and that's kind of an idea that I was having today actually, where I'm like, the Democratic Party is literally just a hedge bet for capital owners. They're just hedging their bets by donating to some Democrats. So if the Democrats do end up winning, they'll treat big businesses just as well as Republicans would. Like that's kind of where I'm at right now between Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a real party that could potentially challenge them, not even on like the presidential election level, that like was maybe even challenging them at like the state level, something like that, they would band together. The Democrats and the Republicans would band together against that party, because
Yeah.
their interests
If you
are
actually challenge the
fundamentally
interests,
aligned.
if you challenge the interests that unite the two parties, you would kind of force the two parties to unite with each other against you.
Yeah, I mean, it's capitalism with a bit more crumbs and gay pride flags versus capitalism without that. There's not a huge difference.
Right. Yeah. Um, okay, before I let you go, I was curious, what are your biggest issues with Hassan? Because I feel like at least talking about Ethan Klein and talking about what's happening in Israel and Palestine, you guys overlap pretty well. But obviously, there's been some friction there in the past, so I'm kind of curious.
I think Hassan's friction with me was because there was like a thing like 2 years or so ago where someone criticized him for reacting to their video and just getting up and leaving. And I
Oh,
was like, yeah,
so
the
you were a
shitty.
part of React Gate?
I mean, React. What like does that
I
mean?
don't know.
Like,
I just made it
yeah,
up.
it's you. I mean, I don't have an issue with Hassan watching my videos, but that's why he does not like me is because he saw me participating in that or like criticizing him for that. Like it wasn't even like just him, right? Like there's way worse people than him. There's people who run entire React channels that are just based on stealing other people's content. At least he's a political commentator. At least he has something actually useful about the world to say. But like, I think he saw that and he sort of really overreacted to that and just assumed that I hate him.
That's
But
hilarious.
I mean, aside from that, like, I mean, there are disagreements that I have with him on many things, but nothing remotely significant. It's nothing compared to the disagreements that I have with a lot of other people.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And that, man, like, I've been dealing a lot with people that are like, why left the left? And what Ethan says a lot. If I'm not 100% with the left, even though I share 95% of things with them, they're going to gatekeep being against genocide. Like he
What
said,
does that even mean? Gatekeep being against genocide.
yeah, I
I
should,
mean, you're against genocide or not? Like,
right.
what does that mean?
I should share this. So someone made a Reddit post that basically said like the real barrier to progress in ending this genocide is people saying that you can't be against it if you don't 100% agree with me, and I just thought I just thought it was so funny.
So you're like 90% against genocide then? What does that mean? It's just so dumb.
Yeah, I don't know,
It's,
but
it's like people who don't think this shit is like it's psyops on his subreddit. It's like Destiny fans posting shit on his subreddit and then Ethan posted to his story. He's such a fucking dumbass. They bait him so easily.
yeah, but
He also has a burner account. I don't know if you noticed.
a burner account on Reddit.
Yeah, he very often posts something on his burner account and then posts it to his story pretty much immediately.
Oh my god, that is. I haven't sunk to that level yet, but anyway, that's something that I've been seeing a lot, and it's kind of like, Hassan's uncle Chank will say that too with trans people. Democrats lost because they're not defending. They're like defending trans women and playing in women's sports. We should just abandon that. So he's like, I'm 95% with the left, but that 5% they're criticizing me for. And I just think it's like the classic beginning to become a conservative where you're like, the left isn't letting me be left, so I'm going to be conservative now.
Look, yeah, I mean, Ethan Klein's conception of what it means to be pro-Palestinian is to say the right phrases once or twice, and then start talking about how Palestinians constitute a demographic threat. Like, he just he conceives of himself as like having done the things that he needs to do because he doesn't conceive of these things as like actual principles, actual political beliefs. For him, it's like a phrase that he says, and then you have to praise him for saying the phrase. It's so fucking weird. Because I don't know, like, what does he expect? Like, I said it's a genocide. I said Palestinians deserve freedom. What more do you want me to say?
Right.
Well, I mean, I don't want you to really say anything. I want you to have the correct beliefs. I want you to have principles that would make us like, that make you like a human being with feelings for other people. That's what I want from you. But you don't have that. It's not a matter of just saying the right phrases. It's a matter of like being for basic principles of justice, freedom, you know? And he's clearly not that if you listen to what he actually has to say in full.
Yeah. It really does just feel like he wants to be left alone and have Israel go back to the way it is, where no one was criticizing it and
Yeah,
everyone
when
thought
he
it was so
lived there,
cool.
when he lived there, and it was just like good for him. And Gaza was being bombed within his earshot. He could hear it, but it just sort of annoyed him a little bit when he was trying to sleep at night. That's all. Not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, damn. Well, I hope LonerBox doesn't go back on the H3 podcast, but if he does, I'll be watching for a video that you make.
Isn't that supposed to be like a comedy podcast? What the fuck are they even doing with that?
I don't know. And Ethan is criticizing Hassan for platforming Rashid Al Hadid, and he literally, and like, Hassan wasn't platforming him. He was just interviewing him and asking him about anime. He's not like, tell us your thoughts about Israel Palestine and how we should follow that. And then Ethan brings on LonerBox and is like, I think you're a great alternative to Hassan. I want my fans to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think you're a great alternative to Hassan because you literally don't even have like even remotely the same politics. That's why it's like, bring on fucking Ben Shapiro as an alternative to Norman Finkelstein and just say, I think you're a great alternative. Like, yeah, they're not the same. What the fuck are you talking about?
Oh my God, I've literally been calling for Ethan to bring on like someone like Norman Finkelstein for months now, and he brings on
Norman
LonerBox.
Finkelstein would have a heart attack. We need him alive. No, he can't.
I mean, he handled Destiny. He might be able to handle Ethan.
He sounded like he was on the brink of dying.
Oh,
screaming at Destiny. I don't know.
That's true. Oh man. All right. Well, I'll be. So what video do you have coming out tomorrow? Give me that sneak peek again.
No, it was just a stream I was going to talk about the week because I stream once a week and I
Destiny with BB's
bang it all out at
cousin.
once.
All right, well, have a good stream tomorrow, and I'll have to check that out.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for talking with me. This was a fun conversation. Yeah, I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye. Ba-boom. Bad Empanada, or as I like to call him, LonerBox. Just kidding.